Peeps, we were talking about GHS. And I told you that in this video, we're going to talk more detail about the GHS. What is it? What does it do? How many people are involved? So we're going to get right to it. So the first thing that I want to mention is that participation in the GHS is completely voluntary. You do not have to participate in this. No one is forcing you to do it. However, right now, the GHS has been adopted by many countries. How many countries? 67 in total. So a lot of people are on board, and they know that this is a good investment for them, because the whole purpose of the global harmonization is to make sure that countries can talk to other countries about chemical safety, and that they don't have to invest more money into getting that product passed or clearanced for sale or distribution in another country. That's basically what they're setting out to do. So they're bringing all of these people to the table, and they're discussing what works and what doesn't work. What would they like to see? What doesn't have to be included? And those are the things that they are walking away with, and those are the driving forces that concern many of the regulations that are involved here. The people that participate, again, these 67 countries, they can buy or they can sell chemicals to each other. Without extra work. And that extra work is typically on exposure data or safety data. That's the whole reason to participate in this. It makes sense. We have one organization that determines the rules and regulations. Everyone is consistent no matter what country that you live in. Not only buy and sell, but transportation is also included as well. For us, we would involve our Department of Transportation into this, but transportation is also addressed. That way, a company from the United States can sell something to Australia, and when that basically is sold, that chemical has to be transported to Australia, and once it arrives on land, it has to be driven to wherever it needs to go to. All of that is transportation issues. It's on the road with other people. It's on the road with other cars. It's in a boat. It's in a plane. How do we handle these types of chemicals to make sure that they are safe for everyone else that's around them? So transportation is also addressed in the GHS. There are 4 organizations in total that are involved in the GHS in the United States. And this is OSHA for occupational safety, the EPA, environmental protection, the DOT, Department of Transportation, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Now, other people in other countries can be involved in this as well, but these are kind of the 4 major players in the United States that sits on the board, that sits at the table to help determine what works and what doesn't work. Out of all 4 of these, the leading role is given to OSHA, and they have their hands in almost every little facet of this possible. So OSHA's came around and they've gave us some deadlines. GHS, we're now heavily involved in it. There were some updates to it. They wanted everyone to get on board with the updates. So what OSHA decided to do is that in December of 2013, now that date's already passed, they wanted all employees to be trained on new label elements. That's kind of when they made some changes to the pictograms and what the pictograms meant and the format of the label. And to make sure that everyone was on board from previous, they wanted everyone to receive some type of training that can be documented, stating that they knew good and well what these pictograms and stuff meant from that point on. Then they said by June 2015, we're going to comply with provisions. And then in June 2016, again, it's already passed, they wanted update labeling and communication. And they wanted all companies to provide additional training for new hazards. So here's where the government begins to become a problem or a nuisance in a way. OSHA is looking out for you, occupational safety. They want to make sure that the person is safe, and they want to make sure that the company is providing a safe workplace for you. They go to a board, they begin to talk about changes, they begin to change things, and then they come back to the table and say, well, guess what? We've changed everything on you, and now we want you to implement all of these training measures at your company at your own expense because of the decisions that we made at the table. Some big companies, not a problem. They have the money in order to implement these training measures, and they were able to squeeze it into their schedules and do it without a problem. Some of the mom and pop places, though, that requires money from them. The mom and pop places, they don't have money like these big Fortune 500 companies. So they had to make the investment. They had to make investment into training. They had to make the investment into courses. They had to make investments into all of the teaching materials that came along with all of these new kind of things that should have been implemented in a laboratory. So, bottom line, what I'm saying is that right now, all laboratories should have trained and qualified staff that knows all of the changes that have taken place in the GHS. And that was because of OSHA. Now, let's turn our focus to the SDS sheet. SDS sheets are documents. And the purpose of these is to help workers. Way back when OSHA, yes, again, I told you, put down OSHA almost every single time. You might not get it wrong. OSHA required information to be provided into what they called an MSDS sheet, Material Safety Data Sheet, and recommended that all MSDS sheets follow what they called the American National Standards Institute. We have an abbreviation for this. It's ANSI, ANSI. And what they're referring to was Z400.1 format. Now, they didn't require it. They just recommended it. So if you were a chemical supplier, and if you were producing a chemical, and you were selling that chemical to someone that purchased it, not only did you have to give them the chemical, of course, but you had to give them the MSDS sheet. We've talked about that already just a few minutes ago. Because you're giving them the MSDS sheet, there are certain things on that MSDS sheet that should be on there. And OSHA said, listen, if you're going to make these MSDS sheets, we would encourage you, recommend, not require, we would encourage you to follow the American National Standards Institute format. Z400.1 is what they gave them to go by. Well, you can kind of imagine. Some companies followed it and some companies did not. It was not a requirement. They did not have to do it. And because of this, the MSDS sheets, depending on the company, sometimes they were really good. However, other times they were horrific. It really depended on the company that was requiring them or providing them. So MSDS sheets, they were not consistent. So along comes the GHS, this globalized system. And the GHS took this idea that OSHA was doing. And they said, you know what, we're going to format and require companies to provide an SDS. And we're going to reformat this a little bit. And we're going to reformat it, and we're going to change the name to kind of symbolize that. And we're going to drop the M from the name, and we're going to do SDS now. And the GHS said, because OSHA already kind of instigated and implemented the ANSI format, then what we're going to do is that if you want to be part of the GHS and you are writing these SDSs, we do not want the inconsistencies that were showing up here. And because of that, if you want to be part of this organization, you have to. You have to follow this Z400.1 format. So it is now a requirement. You have to do it. No longer are they allowing companies to kind of shortcut some of the information that might be included on the MSDS sheets. And now the SDS sheets are all identical, or at least they should be. No matter what company that you're ordering these chemicals from, when they provide you the SDS sheet, it should be the same consistency no matter the company or the source of that particular chemical. With that said, here's the scary part. If you're looking at an old MSDS sheet, or if you're looking at SDS sheets, doesn't really matter. Both of these are common. That's good. Both of these are accessible. That's good as well. A lot of times you can find them free on the internet. Just type in the chemical name and then put SDS after it. You'll find the PDF document. So common, accessible, but they are not accurate. Just because they require a format doesn't mean that the information in that format is correct. Well, who would have thought? So it's great template. It's great requirements. The problem is that sometimes the information provided in the SDSs, they are not 100% correct. And here's the thing. Legally, they don't have to be. Which means that a company could produce an SDS. A company can put statements into the SDS. And if you read those statements and you follow by those statements and you realize that that statement is false, doesn't matter. The company has no liability. They do not have to be 100% accurate. Not only that, but if you look at an SDS, you will also find disclaimers. There will always be disclaimers somewhere on the document. That basically covers the company's butts. When they produce this SDS and they give it to you as a user, and let's say that nowhere on that paper does it say that this compound is flammable in the presence of an alcohol. and you use this compound with an alcohol and it catches fire. Well, you look at the SDS and it didn't say anything about it. Doesn't matter. You cannot sue the chemical company that provided you that chemical or provided you that SDS. So if something happens that isn't on the sheet, who's responsible? Well, it's not the company. It basically boils down to the user. So then all of a sudden you're thinking, well, what's the purpose of the SDS sheet then? Well, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. It could be 99% accurate. There could be one or two false statements that might be on the SDS sheet, but for the whole, it's perfectly fine. It gives you all the information that you need to do your job extremely well and to be safe when you do it. So there is some legitimacy behind the SDS sheets and for them to bring out this format of the Z400.1. Keep in mind, though, some things might not be completely correct, and some things could happen that you might not expect when you work with that chemical, and the company is not at fault. All right. Now let's take a look at this format. So what does this format look like? Well, here it is. And these are the 16 pieces of the SDS that companies have to report. If you want to pause this video and kind of write these down, you can. I don't think that we're going to go into too much detail on any one particular section, but just an overview of what's going to be on there. That's really what you want to walk away with. So number one, of course, is the identification. That's the name and the structure, the CAS number. Number two, it says the hazard identification. Any major hazards associated with the chemicals. If so, that's where we're going to put them. Number three is composition and information on ingredients. So what's present? What is there? If it's just one, is it a mixture of different things? Depending on the type of compound, depending on the type of chemical that you're using, this could be very simple or it could be very beefy as far as information is concerned. Number four is the first aid measures. So if something happens and it gets into your eyes, this is what you do. If something happens and it spills onto the floor, this is what you do. Number five is firefighting measures. If this stuff catches on fire or involved in a room fire, this is the kind of steps that you need to take to make sure that all of this is handled the best way possible. Number six is accidental release measures. Number seven is handling and storage. Number eight is exposure control. Number nine is physical and chemical properties. 10 is stability and reactivity. 11, toxic information. 12, how does it react with the environment? 13, how do I get rid of it once I use it? 14, how should this be transported across the United States or in another country? 15, any regulatory information that I need to know about the chemical. And 16, any other information that doesn't fit the other 15 categories can be put there. So when you look at a current SDS sheet, these are now the things that you will see on that sheet for every single chemical that's out there for sale or for use in a laboratory. So that's where this video is going to stop. And in the next video that you'll watch, we'll continue on with our discussion of the SDS sheet and talk about why you would even use it and maybe some of the smaller tidbits of information around the SDS sheet in general.